presentations from 12:30, so please join us for the poster presentations, and they will be taking place in the Yellowwood Terrace. Also, Irene Muller, who was supposed to be presenting at 14:15, will unfortunately not be able to join us today. Therefore, in that place, in venue 3, we will have Lutando Molefe. Just to repeat that, Lutando Molefe will be presenting in place of Irene Muller at 14:15 in venue 3. During the day, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to come to me or to Renee, who is also one of our program directors. Renee, if you can please also just stand. Or if you see any of the people who are in the white shirt that looks like mine, please don't hesitate to go and ask a question or any concern or comment. Renee has also just reminded me that the HSRC, which is the Human Sciences Research Council group, who was meant to be joining us this morning, will unfortunately not be able to join us this morning as they are still on the road. Therefore, they'll either be joining us in the afternoon or tomorrow. And so I know a lot of people were looking forward to that presentation, but we will give an introduction to them once they get here. Before I hand over to the keynote, I would like to call upon Enver Lottering, who will be introducing our keynote speaker for today. Can we please give him a round of applause?
Greetings to all our esteemed guests that have joined us this morning, and thank you for gracing us with your presence once again. My name is Enver Lottering, and I am a student at Rhodes University in Psychology and Afrikaans, but I am also a student leader, a community engagement representative, and I am also part of the SRC Community Engagement Executive. I have been tasked this morning to introduce our keynote speaker for today, with an esteemed PhD in zoology 19 years ago, with a specialization in small mammal physiology, focusing on how an animal form and function enables or constrain animals in their ability to deal with environmental challenges, thus allowing animals to persist over millennial timescales. Her second interest and passion is in human capacity development, a necessary condition for responding to the expectations of the South African National Development Plan and the nation's ambition of being a knowledge-driven economy. Her most recent position as a Director of Research Support and Management at Nelson Mandela University provided support mid-career and established researchers and other strategic interventions such as research chairs, research entities, and institutional research themes to unlock institutional research potential in service of society. Her previous positions as the director at the National Research Foundation, or NRF, of South Africa developed strategic interventions for purposes of facilitating and encouraging research participation across the national system of innovation. Currently serving as the chairperson of the board of directors of the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency, a lifetime member of Council of the Zoological Society of Southern Africa, and a member of the advisory board for the Mammal Research Institute at the University of Pretoria. Fellow guests, it is my esteemed honor to welcoming the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Research, Innovation and Strategic Partnerships at Rhodes University. Please help me extend a warm welcome to Dr. Nomakwezi Nzilikazi.
May I check if I'm audible?
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Thank you, Enver, for that generous introduction. It is indeed a long way from zoology to a scholarly community engagement conference. Colleagues, partners representing various publics, friends of Rhodes University, students, a very good morning to you. On the 21st of October 1949, a young man who would have a great impact on the South African struggle for liberation stood before the student body of the then Fort Hare College and delivered a speech that planted a seed for the ongoing struggle for the decolonization of higher education. In the speech, Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, who was the president of the Student Representative Council, reflected on the idea of an African university, one which would be geared towards an African developmental agenda, Africa and an African university, contending that the former, while geographically located on the African continent, promoted knowledge forms that are at odds with the histories and realities of Africa and her people. An African university, he argued, would not only be an expression of African thought, but would be an embodiment of the aspirations of African people. This sentiment was echoed shortly after Prof. Kied's plenary yesterday in this very venue. The arguments that Sobukwe posed in the speech have shaped discourse on the decolonization of higher education on the African continent and the global south. While there may be debates about the differences in the cultural traditions, spatial constructions, economic trajectories, administrative structures, and geohistories of countries in the global south, colonialism is a universaling encounter. The colonial experience gave birth to the anti-colonialism struggle and to the global south as a symbolic designation that has significant political implications. At the heart of this is the quest for the decolonization of higher education, which emerges from the recognition that education is the site of struggle. Thus, every educational system is a political means of maintaining or modifying the appropriation of discourses and practices. The struggle for the decolonization of higher education, at the center of which is a demand for epistemic justice for a colonized people, is in many ways a struggle for placing communities at the center of knowledge creation and articulation. This is so because a key feature of colonialism is dispossession. Dispossession as a central function of colonialization extends beyond the violent and systemic annexure of lands and economies to the cultures and knowledge forms that are created by subjugated people. This cultural and knowledge dispossession, what we term epistemic violence, is rooted in erasure. To successfully dispossess the people, it is necessary to corrupt and erase the things that define them, their geographies, their institutions, economic systems, cultures, heritage, languages, rituals, and knowledge forms. But we must remember, as Professor Sabelo Ndlovu-Gajini says, that, and I quote, as a people, Africans were always there in human history. They were never creatures of discovery. Africans were always present. Africans were never absent. Africa was never a dark continent. Africans always had their own valid, legitimate, and useful knowledge systems. End quote. In remembering this, we are compelled to reflect on the meaning of engaged research in the context of a South Africa and Africa that is still reckoning with its past, and in the broader global South that is still reeling from the effects of colonialism. But we must also be compelled to think critically about ways in which we can foster and strengthen partnership between academics, communities, and institutions of the global South and the global North to enhance the global impact of community, university, society relationships. This matters because the very struggle for decolonization and by extension, the reimagination of engaged research is anchored on partnerships and international solidarity. The struggle is international in character, and thus the decolonial practice of placing communities at the center of research must necessarily assume the same international character. Engaged research has increasingly become important in addressing and solving local problems. Indeed, allow me to suggest that engaged research is probably the most effective pathway to impact. Although there can be no contestation that the community of scholars and partners gathered at this 3-day conference agree on the criticality of community engagement as a core university mission. We cannot deny, however, the fact that many of our universities, community engagement is seen as a separate issue from the broader academic project. This is evidenced by the fact that community engagement is often a division within universities that works with external stakeholders in a number of ways, formally and informally, through memorandum of understanding, service level agreements, and various engagement fora. While this approach has been helpful in taking universities closer to communities, it has reproduced the idea that community engagement is a form of social investment, and this was contested heavily yesterday, of course, and rightly so. It's not a social investment to communities rather than a philosophical and practical underpinning that must govern the academic project. Community engagement, if it is to serve as an important vehicle for epistemic justice, must extend to the knowledge forms that are used in learning, teaching, and research. This means that communities must be engaged not only as recipients of social investment by universities, but as equally knowledgeable others. These knowledgeable others become equal partners in knowledge co-creation, and by so doing, facilitate the transfer of knowledges and epistemes that inform academic curricula. We heard yesterday afternoon that within the South African context, the National Research Foundation, or NRF, Engaged Research Framework, was presented, and it provides us with a useful and practical set for engaging community and society across the full cycle of research. According to this framework, engagement of communities in the research process can be realized across the full cycle of research. Upstream of research during identification and development of research priorities and strategies, and the formulation of research questions and proposals. Midstream of research through the involvement of publics and communities within the research process itself, such as data gathering. Downstream of research through ensuring that there is utilization of research and innovation outputs and impacts via engagement with communities once the research has been concluded. While this framework is a very powerful tool, researchers must still contend with the tensions arising from our own institutional processes for acquisition of ethical clearance to conduct studies, the long and necessary time frames required to build relationships with communities, and of course, the never-ending pressure associated with university measures such as throughput rate, success rate, and of course, increased research output production. Indeed, these tensions have been the subject of much discussion at various talks that I attended yesterday. Here at Rhodes University, we've been reflecting on revising our research ethics processes to provide a more supportive regulatory environment for engaged research. We encourage and enable researchers to engage with communities during the research planning stage as well as during the data collection processes. The purpose is to improve the quality and rigor of the research, to ensure that the study is acceptable to key role players, and to offset any power differentials that the researchers and research participants may experience. The University Ethics Committee has now instituted an ethics code clearance, which allows the researcher to engage with the community, to workshop research questions, participants, and methods that reflect the interest and priorities of the community rather than the researcher alone. The researcher is then required to follow standard ethical procedures during this interaction, but data collection is not permitted during this phase. As soon as the collaboration between community members and the researchers has been concluded, in the sense that agreement has been reached regarding the research questions, participation and methodologies, the researcher may then apply for formal ethics clearance in the ordinary way and only commence data collection once it has been obtained. I go into a bit of detail on that process because I think it is important that even as we theorize about community engagement and engaged research, we need to start thinking about how our own processes within institutions may constrain or enable the ability to perform engaged research in effective ways. An important point of reflection must be on the assumption and practice that community engaged research is the preserve of the arts, the humanities, and social sciences. This thinking is rooted in the problematic idea that it is only the humanities that should be concerned with employing a sociological imagination in making sense of the world. Particularly in the global south, where colonial encounters have left an enduring legacy, the physical sciences, engineering sciences, biological sciences, mathematical sciences, medical sciences, and economic and business sciences must reflect a transformation agenda. Our universities cannot graduate engineers who do not understand that speciality is as much about engineering as it is about communities, that the built environment must consider social, cultural, and environmental factors which shape our society. Our civil engineers must recognize that their work is to build for a post-colonial society in which infrastructure must benefit everyone instead of a few, as was the case before. Our mining engineering graduates must recognize that mining has an impact on communities and know that it is important to involve communities in mining development to center their interpretation of what development must look like and to work with them to ensure livelihood generation. Our business science graduates must invest in the triple bottom line ethos of safeguarding people, the environment, and profits. Medical doctors that we graduate, working in a South Africa that is diverse, must be invested in the dynamic communities in which they practice, working with both local and migrant communities to address medical and psychosocial challenges. Having said all of that, I must concede that often researchers, through no fault of their own, lack the tools and skills that would allow them to engage in meaningful and impactful ways with various publics, particularly in conducting engaged research. Because we have a responsibility to produce engaged scientists and scholars who respond to the needs of communities and peoples with complex geohistories, perhaps an issue that demands critical reflection is whether higher learning institutions must make community engagement not so much a standalone division, but developed, but must be encouraged and supported to develop an interdisciplinary module that is included in the curricula as a prerequisite for graduation. The development and teaching of such a module must necessarily involve academics and the communities in which they are located. This is what co-creation that we imagine could look like. It is therefore increasingly pleasing to learn that the postgraduate diploma in higher education community engagement at Rhodes University has received accreditation. We are hopeful that this will serve to empower more researchers from various backgrounds with the much needed skills and tools to engage in meaningful and engaged research. Perhaps because of a lack of skills and tools, the practice of engaging with communities in terms of the academic project that often refers only to the extraction of data from the community is still very common. Researchers often go to communities to retrieve data that is then analyzed and interpreted within the confines of the university. Even with ethical processes being prioritized to ensure that no harm is done to participant communities and the resultant data, and that study results are communicated, one cannot escape the sense that communities are anthropological subjects to be studied rather than co-creators of knowledge. This is as much a critique of the practice of research in our universities as it is a reflection on the limitations on community engagement processes that start and end with data extraction. Universities must consistently engage in rethinking beliefs and practices that may hinder the advancement of progressive knowledge forms, including those that exist outside the confines of the academy. This may require a radical disentanglement from practices that reproduce some of the challenges that confront our society. For example, numerous leading universities around the world, the University of Zurich in Switzerland, Utrecht University in the Netherlands, and of course our very own university, and several others have rejected the idea of participating in university rankings, arguing in part that the metrics used to make a determination on this ranking do not reflect the context in which the universities exist. While there may be many debates about these decisions, there is no question that they reflect a new thinking and imagination about the true value of what a university must be, specifically the extent to which it fashions change in its local context through engaged research, societal transformation, social activism, and other indicators that are not adequately considered in the rankings discourse. This brings us to the question of how current higher education planning tools can be used to position engaged research. Within the South African context, the Department of Higher Education, Training, Science and Technology has the responsibility to facilitate the demographic transformation of higher education, an important responsibility in South Africa with a history of segregation and separate development. The current practice of linking funding solely to enrollment targets and research outputs does not reflect the kind of work that universities need to do with regard to community engagement. A case must be made for reviewing of the higher education funding model in our country to factor in other indicators, at the center of which must be community engagement in general and engaged research in particular. This compels us to even revisit the question of a differentiated higher education framework. The South African higher education system has historically been defined by differentiation. Some of the differentiation has been the result of historical legacies that have not been adequately addressed, resulting in a greater inequality amongst our universities, some of which still find themselves with inadequate resources and capacity to provide for the basic needs of their students and stakeholders. Other forms of differentiation have been policy-driven. These include the categorization of universities into traditional universities, universities of technology, and complementary universities, stipulation of the university mission, program offerings because of the government policy and partially the result of the individual decisions of institutions and the resources they have been able to acquire from government or elsewhere. But while there are some pitfalls to differentiation, there is need to think critically about how aspects of its implementation may be very helpful for engaged research. If we understand engaged research to necessitate that, one, higher education learning institutions visit their roles in relation to social and economic imperatives, priorities and societal challenges, and two, redraft their institutional missions, development trajectories, and identities towards a dedicated niche and mission, emphasizing their contribution towards the development of the country, then we must recognize that this means higher learning institutions have comparative advantages. For example, Rhodes University is located in a predominantly rural province where there is also a significant number of small towns. It stands to reason then that the institution should be at the forefront of the development of engaged research on small towns, geographies, and economies. Several campuses of the Tshwane University of Technology are located in townships, dynamic geographies that shape modern South Africa. It stands to reason then that township studies, including research on township development and economies, should necessarily find priority, for example, at TUT. Reimagining a new way of doing research is also a key aspect of rethinking community engagement, for it is in those reimagined just practices that local communities can transform from passive subjects to active co-creators of knowledge. More than this, in the context of post-colonial societies, this reimagination also serves as a vehicle for epistemic justice. For as Ngugi wa Thiong'o argues in his seminal work, Decolonizing the Mind, colonialism deprived the indigenous people of their power to speak. But Dr. Roy argues, echoing the sentiments of decolonial scholars, that there really is no such thing as the voices, that they are only the deliberately silenced or the preferably unheard, as Professor Kirk so eloquently explained to us yesterday. Repositioning community engagement by placing it on the research agenda of universities is crucial if we are to give practical demonstration to the co-creation of knowledge with communities. Co-creation is premised on the understanding that universities and communities are governed by a symbiotic relationship of mutualism, that they are of equal value to one another. For a very long time, there has been a temptation to characterize the indigenous knowledge system, the ways of knowing and being of local communities as unscientific. This has become pronounced with advances in technology that some have argued render traditional methods of knowing and doing obsolete. But there is evidence that resolving present problems necessitates revisiting indigenous knowledge forms. Examples of this can be gleaned in food security studies and water resources science. In the semi-arid Eastern Cape province, for example, our province, this is especially poignant. It is important to understand that these practices are not a mere supplement of technological advances that our universities are innovating, but a critical component to them. Thus, there can be no question that the establishment of a knowledge democracy is something that institutions of higher learning in South Africa and the Global South more broadly should be considering as an integral part of the academic project. Colleagues, as we spend the next few days discussing on community engagement and the trajectory of the community, university, society relationship, engaging and reflecting on past, present, and future possibilities, we must do so with a deep appreciation of the context in which we learn, research, and teach. It is a context that, even with its universal features, has particularities that necessitate greater nuance in how we think about community engagement and engaged research in particular. For our society, this engagement is not and cannot simply be an exercise in partnering with communities and other stakeholders in our academic project. It is fundamentally an exercise in confronting epistemic violence and erasure that has happened in our society and a way of seeking epistemic justice. I wish to conclude this address with this words from Robert Mangaliso Sobukwe, who has a residence named after him here at Rhodes. You have seen by now what education means to us, the identification of ourselves with others. Education to us means service to Africa. I thank you.
Thank you so much to the DVC for such a deep, insightful, and engaging look into positioning engaged research on the research agenda of higher education. We would like to take up some questions from the audience. We have one from my left.
Hi. Well, thank you for your presentation. I'm Matthias. I'm from Chile. I'm studying my PhD in the US now. But I was wondering on something you mentioned at the beginning about the idea of an African university. So, in which ways engaged research is a way, and community engagement in general is a way of recreating that idea or creating commonalities between countries in Africa. And I would like to know if you are doing steps toward that unity as a continent.
Thank you so much, Prof. And we have one hand. Would you answer?
That's good.
But the concern that I have is that the pro forma ethics commission forms, are written quite academically, and I feel that we need to look at de-academicizing language-wise as well, because I think that's also a massive barrier, and I don't know if we look at it often enough. Thank you.
We can take one more question, and then DVC would you like to answer, and then we'll revert back.
Okay, good morning. My name is Matthew Shivambu. I'm a master's student here at Rhodes University in the Politics Department, and I'm also one of the student volunteers at the Community Engagement Division here at Rhodes University. I think the first thing is just to acknowledge the importance of the speech that was given by Madam DVC. There are a number of things that stood out for me and a lot of us in the room. But my question is around how do we position the university and also change knowledge-making systems, because you spoke about the issue of decoloniality. And I'm asking this question specifically just because there are universities in our country that are still not part of this great initiatives of community engagement. Contributing into their respective community, because Rhodes is not the only university that is located in a rural area. There are many other universities that can also do the very same thing that we are doing here at Rhodes University. The second part about the issue of decoloniality, we know there are divided views on the standard procedure on how we should go about decolonizing community engagement or the curriculum of university. So I just want to understand from you, Madam DVC, how do we go about doing that, positioning universities, producing knowledge, and also ensuring that all the universities, all the 26 universities, and others beyond our country also engage in this great initiatives. Thank you.
DVC, we'll have to join you for answering those three questions. Okay, thank you very much for those questions. Let's start with the idea of an African university. I think the central theme there is the idea of place, and the idea of being anchored in one's geography and conducting and pursuing knowledge projects that have meaning and impact for those communities. And I think this is an idea that can be taken anywhere in the world, not necessarily an African university. But I think the original words of Robert Mangaliso Soloko was bringing into question this idea of reproduction of a university from the global north predominantly and reproducing that in a different context, and whether that is appropriate and whether that serves the citizens. I do think that there is an opportunity for various African universities to have some shared ideals and to have some common goals. For example, when we look at the SDGs 2030, although those will soon expire, 2030 is only 6 years away, my own reflection is that the goals that are being pursued will have relevance long after 2030. The idea of addressing inequality, the idea of quality education, climate action, sustainable buildings and environments, all of those are broad frameworks that we can channel our collective efforts towards. We also have the Africa 2063 vision, which is the vision of the African Union, and therein is a very broad research agenda where all our universities could probably find meaning and expression. In terms of the ethics processes, are we doing enough by doing no harm? I think it's a good start, as a principle, first do no harm. Is it far enough? I don't think so, but I think that steps are being made, for example, in this two-tier process that Rhodes University has adopted, where we provide an opportunity for researchers to engage with the communities. And I think that engagement may also help us with the second issue that you raised, which is to bring the contents of the consent form in ways that the community can engage with and understand, because then you get an opportunity to explain what it is you seek to do in a language that is accessible. Where we say research that is not engaged research, should that even be performed? Well, I would have to say yes, because I think there's value in all forms of research. I think there's value in radioastronomy. I think there's value in studying the behavior of ants. I think, not research that does not involve humans is not the only kind of research that we should be engaging in. And so I would say yes, even that research that does not have a community element and that does not easily lend itself to usefulness within communities is definitely worthy of pursuit, but that is my view. And then in terms of how do we position, engage research and community research across our 26 universities, I think, our national frameworks already do provide for this, and that it becomes a matter of leadership and implementation at the various 26 universities. But I do think that there are certain approaches that we should think about piloting and hopefully start to roll out in a more broad way within our universities. For example, as I was suggesting, it may be very useful to develop a module that introduces our undergraduate students to the principles of community engagement, engaged research, responsible citizenship, etc., so that it stops being an endeavor that is driven by individual preference. So I'll give you an example. I'm a zoologist. As I was introduced, my primary research focus is on how animals deal with unpredictability of the environment. Other than obtaining permission to work on a nature reserve park or a private farm, I really have no interaction with humans, and so the idea of engaged research in that context is not a particularly meaningful one. However, when I joined Rhodes University, I had been at several universities, and I must say, and be honest and frank and candid about the fact that in quite a few universities, the model is still very much being benevolent towards communities. So you can go teach at schools, and there's value in that. You can open up your laboratory on a Saturday to a local high school, and there's definitely value in that. But it was never, I had never been prior to Rhodes, been truly exposed to the deep, meaningful ways in which we engage with our communities in structuring, forming the research questions, designing the methodologies, choosing the study sites, etc., and getting very valuable advice from communities. And so the first thing I did was to register for the SLP on community participatory-based methodologies. And, my idea was it should be fun learning with postgrads. And I'm really glad I did that. And so this idea of continuous personal development is still very much driven from an individual interest perspective. And I think we need to more deeply embed these principles into our curriculum so that they're not optional. That would be my view. Thank you so much, BBC. A round of applause again. And now we will be having our breakaway sessions. Just a brief reminder that the University of Pretoria group will be presenting in this venue. This is our venue one for the people who couldn't join us yesterday. Venue one, which is Thomas Pringle, and then next venue on my right is Zikana room venue 2, and then on my left is Atherstone room, which is venue 3. Enjoy the day. Yes. Yes, please, a second round of applause for the GBC.
Its outcomes. To achieve the goal, there are three main aims. The first one is community work, where we attempt to raise awareness among parents and the general community of our three target communities in East London regarding the importance of speech and language development in children, for example, for their participation in social environments. We aim to establish a network of ECD sites and specialists or teachers who can collaborate in our attempt to better understand the demographic of these children, support us in promoting the project throughout the community, and so forth. It also helps to establish a network of regional healthcare professionals. This includes speech therapists, ENTs, optometrists, and audiologists, who can support children identified to be at risk for the development of speech, language, vision, and hearing delays. We aim to empower the target communities to conduct regular developmental, hearing, and vision screening through extensive community care worker collaboration, education and training, and the provision of equipment to conduct these screenings. Develop promotional materials that can be distributed to ECD practitioners, parents, older siblings, and extended families through community outreach days, as well as by the community care workers when conducting screenings at our participating ECD sites. By establishing these networks and providing sufficient training and continuous support, it is our hope that with time and continuous support, the community will become more self-reliant, and that our partner NGOs and community care workers will be able to support learner screening once we withdraw from the project ourselves. Speech therapy, the next aim is speech therapy research and practice, where we aim to research COSA speech and language development in young children, as it is the second most spoken language in South Africa, yet it still has the least amount of research regarding its acquisition in home language speaking children. This will help us to better improve evidence-based practice speech therapy service delivery, as speech therapists will better understand how exactly COSA speaking children typically develop their language, the sequences of the language development, and how to provide more effective and targeted service delivery to this population. We also aim to support the development of culturally and linguistically appropriate speech, sound, articulation, and language assessment procedures and tools to more accurately assess and diagnose speech and language-related difficulties faced by these children. This aim is facilitated through the collection of comprehensive 60-minute-long language samples, which are recorded using sophisticated audio capturing equipment. The samples are elicited and recorded by Health Profession Council registered speech therapists, transcribed by Health Professional Council speech therapists, and analyzed by listening panels consisting of Health Professional Council speech therapists. Then our third aim is speech therapy educational collaboration. It was important for us to include regional higher education institutions, speech language therapists, and community care workers to form part of the regional collaborative network that we are establishing, and that in the screening, data elicitation, transcription, and analysis process, we include these partners. We would like to eventually disseminate the knowledge gained to access regional speech therapists and higher education institutions in the Eastern Cape province, as COSA is the predominantly spoken language by children in the province. We have also developed in the process of further developing online resources that can be distributed to various speech therapy groups for consumption, as well as local community members. This includes developmental checklists, parent handouts, and all of them are translated in English, Afrikaans, and Xhosa. All materials are freely available online. Of course, such an ambitious project will not be feasible without a comprehensive collaborative network of both regional and national NGOs and higher education institutions, but also regional, national, international universities, ECD centers, or ECD practitioners working in these centers. This is just a basic outline of what our project looks like, our partners, and then the people collaborating within those partnerships. Our first partner that we acquired was the Masibumbane Development Project, or NDO, which is an East London-based NGO who forms the cornerstone of the project. Their focus is primarily on early childhood development, literacy development, and reducing truancy rates in school-aged children. They already had an existing network of collaborating ECD centers and community care workers within our target communities, whose expertise and experience we could use to support the screening of children. NDO also already has existing working relationships with other project partners, such as the University of Fort Hare. This NGO has been instrumental in the management of the screening process, supporting us with securing contracts with local community vendors and venues for community outreach days. This is also just two photos of some of our participating ECD centers. We currently have 12 ECD centers participating over 3 different communities, with approximately 500 to 600 children attending these ECD centres. Then there's University of Fort Hare. They launched their speech therapy program in 2018 and has achieved major successes and also some difficulties. However, this project aims to support the university in student training and the provision of educational materials and opportunities for developing clinical skills through practical experience during our outreach days under the supervision of the project team where support is required. The project team therefore engaged with the institution and the head of the speech therapy program early on to discuss what their needs might be and where the project can further support them. This is a picture of, on the left is of the speech therapy students who participate in our outreach days, and to the right after training was provided to them on parent counselling, which was a need identified by the university for their students. Then we have the Rhodes Foundation, which is a national non-for-profit organization and is the branch of the Rhodes Group, which is South African-owned and based world-leading company in mobile health, hearing and vision screening. The non-for-profit branch aims to develop, implement and scale sustainable hearing and vision screening services using digital technologies that can be used by anyone, anywhere and with minimal training. The Rhodes Foundation has sponsored some of the equipment being used for vision and hearing screening, and their director, Ms. Sasha de Kool, also developed and presented the theoretical and practical education training programs for the project's community care workers who are conducting the screenings. Then our ECD practitioners. This photo was taken on our first meeting in East London in mid-2023, where we discussed the project quite in depth with them, and where the school principals were also chose the name of the project, Masipakame, which they translated to We All Rise Together, because they felt that it would most appropriately represent the project. This is our community care workers. The project employs 6 wonderful community care workers and 1 community care worker supervisor who participated in an extensive 3-day hybrid theoretical and practical education and training program hosted by the project team. The community care workers are our feet on the ground who are responsible for conducting the hearing, vision and developmental screening using mobile health tools at participating ECD sites. As of the time of this presentation, the community care workers have screened over 280 children since March 2024, and the project team can track this progress due to the screenings being conducted on ML tools, which automatically sync with the Clear Cloud storage database. This is the tools that we are using, the Gulab Vision for vision, Hearing Clear Screen for hearing, and the PACE developmental screening tool, which has been already established and validated general developmental screening tool for children. However, Dr. Maria Rato and Prof. Jenny van der Linde are currently working on developing into a mobile health tool that can be used in a South African context. This is the community care workers after completing their practical training. These are our regional speech therapists. Unfortunately, Ms. Debbie did not want, but it's respected, did not want the picture shared. All of our speech therapists are regional. They are based in East London, and they work within the communities that we are targeting, because they are all also employed either by the Department of Education or Department of Health, except for Ms. D.P. Ledidi, who found a wonderful contract in Indonesia recently. The equipment that's been used is the Masimo Kuleni Isikosa articulation tool, which was developed by and is currently being validated by Prof. Michelle Pascoe at the University of Cape Town. The equipment being used to elicit the language samples include various age-appropriate toys that can be used by the speech therapist to elicit language samples using naturalistic play-based methods. And then to spread the word of our project to the parents of the communities that the project is targeting, 2 outreach days were held on Saturdays, which was what our NGO recommended because they said that's the most likely day for them. Then each school brought their children and their parents to the event along with the ECD practitioners. This is a picture of one of the smaller ECD centers playing with one of our community care workers wearing hats branded with the project logo. Each awareness day was made up of various stations for the parents and children who attended. Station 1 is where a trained community care worker and sometimes with a speech therapist will explain the informed consent form in either English or Xhosa to the attending parents, where possible in Afrikaans. The parents then have the option to either sign the forms there or take it home to sleep on it and return it to the ECD Centre principals the next week should they decide to let their children participate. At the second station, the parents were trained on typical speech and language development of children between the ages of 3 and 8 years by University of Fort Hare speech therapy students engaging in promotion and prevention training. Station 3 is where parents, grandparents, and older siblings of children attending the participating ECD centres were screened using the mHealth tools, which either were or are being used on the children, grandchildren, or siblings of those. The goal was to provide the broader family unit with a free vision and hearing screening and referral to an appropriate healthcare professional in the established referral network where appropriate. The screenings were conducted by the University of Fort Hare speech therapy students, as hearing screening is a mandated area of practice in which a certain number of hours must be obtained to display minimum competency to the health board. Station 4 was dedicated to providing the children that attended with stimulation play to develop mentally appropriate physical and cognitive games, book reading activities, and storytelling, as well as listening games. This station was manned by both speech therapists and community care workers. Then at Station 5, which was the last station, the children from the ECD centres and all of their family members who attended the events were provided with nutrition and balanced nutritious food, parcels procured from local community vendors under the guidance of the Masovana Development Organisation. So then the question becomes, what did we learn during the project thus far? Because it is a 5-year project, although we are currently only starting the 3rd year at the end of May. We are ending the 2nd year now. The first one that we want to highlight is the importance of investing in relationships and building your community network early on in the project, and consciously maintaining these relationships through regular check-ins and open and honest communication. For me, it was also finding ways that everyone is comfortable communicating. Because the project is so extensive, it is difficult to keep track of everyone and everything happening, everyone participating, everything happening within this project. So we create various WhatsApp groups, Google Meet sessions. We have spreadsheets on Google Docs, which is password protected for ethical considerations, which is used for communication. It reinforced to us the importance of respecting the community stakeholders, as they were, such as the ECD Centre principals, as they were able to achieve all of our project deliverables and much more due to their already established knowledge on the community, their existing community networks. For example, how MDO was able to connect us with the ECD centres, the community care workers, as well as the local vendors, which was important to our project. Other collaborating community care workers, speech therapists, and NGOs are all located within the targeted community. Their knowledge has been instrumental in our decision-making progress. For example, while laying the groundwork for the project, we had our ECD principles, as we discussed. In the project, we discussed the project in depth with them. They were our advisors on what they experienced in previous community projects. They advised us on how to approach the communities. They also advised us on the languages spoken by the children. So that was really important for us because they set the tone for our whole project during the establishing of our networks. The establishment of a diverse network of stakeholders for the project of this scale requires effective and transparent and diverse communication methods. For example, a big need for our project, although there's still 3 more years of the project, a big concern for the community or the community stakeholders that we are working with is the continuity of the project. How long will this be possible to keep the project running? So while we are not sure how long our funding will last or keep going, beyond the 5 years, we are already looking at options that might support us in funding for the project beyond that. Then looking towards the future, because the project is not yet finished, our goals are still to work on the sustainability of the project. That's why we're looking at future funders, as I said, once our certain source of funding ends. Together with that, we wanted to derive meaningful milestones for speech and language development, of course, for speaking children, to improve our understanding of language development. in these children and our understanding of the developmental sequence of the language. Because our current difficulty that's faced by speech therapists is the direct translation of English or Afrikaans tools to Xhosa. But that is not viable or long-term solution, and that's the best option right now. But unfortunately, that misses nuances in speech and language production, as there are certain sounds in the language that the current popular demographic of speech therapists might not be aware of, as it is currently a white female-driven group of people, and mostly English speaking. So there is a lack of diversity within the group. So we need to develop more diverse assessment materials. We want to continue to develop and implement professional development programs for regional speech therapists, as well as higher education institutions, and then relay this information on a national level. We are in the process of developing a model for automatic speech recognition of Xhosa-speaking children. This will enable South African speech therapists to use one of the gold standards of language assessment in children more effectively, which is language sampling. This technology will allow speech therapists to keep a mobile device near the Xhosa-speaking child during spontaneous and natural play, and the device will automatically transcribe their speech into text. This is being done with the support of various engineers from Stellenbosch University and Northwest University, under the guidance of Prof. Phoebe de Wet, and the tool is currently being developed in German, English, Afrikaans, Setswana, Sotho, Salagua, and now isiXhosa as well. We would also like to expand our online offering of resources. Then this is the project. Well, at the end of one of our outreach days, just so that you can at least see what the project team looks like. To the left is Prof. Jean van der Linde, and to the right is Prof. Juan Bormann from Stellenbosch University. Okay, thank you.
Thanks very much for that insightful presentation, and it deals with children also, and I'm sure that you have many questions related to that. So can we take our first round of questions? Can you hold the mic up a bit so
Okay. Do any of the researchers, the actual researchers, speak the language? And if not, would it not be helpful to develop the speech language therapists, or whatever the speech therapists that are in the Eastern Cape academically, to make them co-authors of the study, co-researchers, instead of the people that are doing the work on the ground? Thank you. As a sustainable means of development.
Thanks. Here's another question.
Hi, what a wonderful project. But as you yourself pointed out, that the projects by their very nature come to an end when funding ends. So how confident are you then that the learnings in those ECD centers actually can continue without the aid of this project? So in other words, how sustainable are those learnings and the improvements, etc., that have been made? Thanks. What a wonderful project.
Thank you. There was one more question on that side, yes?
Somewhere on one of your slides, you had a line about sensitivity to community gatekeepers and their concerns. If you could maybe just elaborate a little bit on that. Who are community gatekeepers that you're referring to, and what would their concerns be?
Thanks. We'll take your question.
Okay, so with regards to the use of Xhosa-speaking speech therapists, all of the speech therapists that are involved in actually eliciting the samples from the children, currently transcribing, because we do not have the technology yet, them actually transcribing it by hand from the audio to the visual method of writing, of written speech or written language. They are also in all home language speaking courses, speech therapists, registered and practicing speech therapists. the listening panels that are analyzing the results to determine the developmental levels are also all Xhosa-speaking speech therapists. There are Xhosa-speaking speech therapists, of course, in academia. However, regionally, the only university in the Eastern Cape, as far as I'm aware at this point in time, that delivers the program that has a speech therapy program is University of Fort Hare, and currently their department is still quite small, and they have a lot of challenges that they face due to only starting in 2018. So at this point in time, it's not that they can't, they are a project partner, but they don't necessarily have the capacity because they only have 3 or 4 staff members that have to deliver lectures and supervise clinical practice for over 100 students every year. So that is one of the concerns. But all the speech therapists that are used are home language speaking speech therapists that are registered, that are trained. And all speech therapists are trained and qualified to do language sample elicitation analysis and transcription. So does that answer your question, at least, or your concern?
My concern was about because they would also register UP or University of Stellenbosch, so that they're part of the creation of the knowledge and not only they're part of they benefit from the research.
Yes. No. Currently the project has no publishable research outcomes. So I understand what you mean, but currently the project does not aim to publish the results as of yet. Unfortunately, also we are beholden to the funders, so we cannot do anything without and the inclusion of anyone without the funders' approval, which is at this point in time internationally located. Okay, does that answer your question? I understand what you mean, but it's difficult to include people because we need to then explain to the funders why. And in a heterogeneous society such as Germany, for example, we've even had a lot of conflict, or not conflict, but a lot of difficulty in explaining to them why we want to, for example, provide nutrition at the outreach days. At first, they didn't understand why we want to provide food boxes. So, and we had to that was quite a process to motivate just that. So, because I think when they think of low socioeconomic circumstances, they don't see what we see or think what we think. Okay, and then how confident that learning ECD centers can continue without the aid of the project? At this point in time, we are only starting to incorporate the sustainability of the project. Our focus right now is to provide extensive training. We are going again in June. We are providing another workshop for the ECD practitioners, all of the University of Fort Hare students, as well as regional speech therapists and audiologists. And the project we are currently trying to obtain devices, in-house tools that we can give to the NGOs so that we can hopefully help them establish with the support of the university. That's our hope, is to have the University of Fort Hare and the NGOs work together collaboratively to keep the program running. Because, as I said, it is an outcome of the Health Professions Council for speech therapy students to obtain a minimum amount of screening hours for language and speech and hearing. But we really want the community care workers to remain involved. So that is also one of our outcomes in June, is to have that meeting and continue that discussion. So at this point in time, I don't think the project has reached sustainability yet, but we are hoping to achieve it in the next 3 years. Okay. The last question that we have, sensitivity to community gatekeepers and their concerns. The community gatekeepers as such was not what I expected, but I think that is the cultural shift from working predominantly in North West and Gauteng and then moving to the Eastern Cape. They were much more receptive to us, but also I think it was one of the topics of discussion. You said that this over-researched community, it's not a community that has engaged a lot with research or researchers, according to my understanding. But they were open to us working with them, but we had to have the buy-in. For example, I refer to them as gatekeepers, but the school ECD, the ECD principals carry a lot of weight in the community. So especially because they are well established, most of them have been open for 30 plus years. So I think there are institutions in the community, and having their buy-in, for example, enabled us, because they were the ones that had the meeting with the parents, distributed the pamphlets. They were the ones telling us how to engage, that they would rather engage with them, and then they will come with the parents to the ECD or to the outreach campaign days. So that was a big thing for us. But I think because we have the guidance, but again, then that knowledge of an NGO such as the Muslim Bond Development Organization to guide us into, because they know that community very, very well, all those communities. So they were able to guide us through this process of who do we meet with first and how do we take it from there. So I think their knowledge was really why we could kick off the project quite well. Thank you.
Thanks, Johan. I think we are standing in the way between you and tea, and there's 5 minutes left for the next presentation to start. So please can I encourage you to take the conversations into the tea break. Johan Maas with a Z at the end, okay? Please remember that. He pointed it out to me. So Johan, just to summarize then, what we're hearing from the participants here today is, my take homes is to take the issue of participatory action, to a further process when doing the evaluation of the project and going forward. So I think that was what the colleagues were asking for, how many people are on board and who does it belong to and how is the ownership determined. And that would then move into the sustainability part as well, I suppose. So to sensitize the funders a little bit more to our realities, which you're doing an excellent job on from the way you've explained it. And the sustainability question, I think, is coming through the conference so far quite a lot. And like yesterday's presentation, the panel, that was where that also came up in respect of when the funding ends, do you just go to clean the weeds under the board that says this project was funded? And so I'm reminded that you are doing such good work in the Eastern Cape with the University of Fort Hare and with the community, as well as the fact that we need to be careful about stigma that is attached to free gifts that we also give to people in projects. So when I saw the hat on the children, I just wondered, it's branded, what is the stigma that's attached to that possibly? So I just made a note for myself for own research. Thank you very much, colleagues. You may proceed to tea.